We are in Tavo, and I want to turn to the 27th chapter. We're going to start with verse 8. Verse 8, it says, "You shall inscribe on the stones all the words of this Torah, well clarified." Moshe and the Kohanim, the Levites, spoke to all of Israel, saying, "Be attentive and hear, O Israel. This day you have become a people to Hashem your God. You shall hearken to the voice of Hashem your God, and you shall perform all of his commandments and his decrees with which I have commanded you today." I want to take those words and I want to share with you a concept that comes out of the Torah of our great sages. This idea of the eternal today. The eternal today. Living for Hashem through his Torah. The first part I want to cover is going to be verse 8 when it talks about inscribing on the stones. But before I do, let me give you, a sort of a pre-warm-up to the subject matter so you can understand what I'm talking about, eternal today. And you think that that's like a giant oxymoron. It's like jumbo shrimp, right? Eternal today. Today is today. Eternal means that there are no days or no nights, etc. Well, what I'm saying is, we cannot live and change anything in the past. I cannot change actually anything in the future. I can only change what is today. My relationship with Hashem is today. In reality, every one of us in physicality lives an eternity in today. You follow? Now, there are people who wake up every day and live the past. If this wouldn't have happened, and if you wouldn't have said that, and if this thing wouldn't have done, then I would have been, and this would have happened, and I could have been better, right? If I'd have only married this person, if I'd only done this or done that, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is right now. What matters is the 24 hours that you have, or less, in this moment, in what you do. Every second, think about this, every second a person gets up and thinks about the past is wasting eternity. Every person that gets up and worries about the future deletes their eternal presence in the physicality. And what really set this off for me is to realize that God says to the people of Israel today, well, did they not start this journey 40 years ago when they left Egypt, and now he's just now saying today? Well, we'll talk about this in a moment. First thing, Israel is getting ready to cross over the Jordan. They're getting ready to go to the mountain of decision. So the good decisions, bad decisions. And on top of Mount Ebal is a stone that is going to be inscribing, like a mezuzah stone with the Torah on it. It's going to be plastered over, and it's going to be written in the languages of the 70 nations. Now we know the 70 nations rejected the Torah, and someone would ask, and someone did ask this, well, where does it ever say that in the Torah? Remember at Mount Sinai, when the Torah was given, the whole earth shook and turned black, and the voice of Hashem spoke, or whatever that voice is, and all of them were able to see a divine download of the Torah. All of them rejected it on hand. All of them. It's too much. Israel says, Moshe, you tell us, we'll go ahead and do it. Right? It sealed the fate of the Gentile nations. Now, what does that mean? Not individuals within the Gentile nations. We're talking about as a whole. It sealed their fate. It meant that their fate was to attach to Hashem from a distance. Their fate was to live for Hashem at the lowest level. meaning their spirituality and their creativity and connecting to God could actually be 2 inches deep and 20 miles wide, and that's all right. Just all right. It's nothing special. However, individuals can connect to Hashem at the highest level. We know that now because of this whole idea of the Torah being given to the nations for the B'nai Noach, for the Ger, for the convert, etc. It is interesting because it says that the language it was written in the 70 language so that they could all understand. But Torah was written in such a way that an individual couldn't study or read the script of the Torah and actually make heads or tails of it. Right? What do we have to understand what the Torah says? The oral Torah, right? That's what we have to have. There's a story that says that Ptolemy, who was a invader of the great land of Israel, and he said, what I'll do is I will have my Torah translated, but I'll bring the wisest sages in from Judaism to do that. He put them all in a separate room and had them interpret this section of Torah. They all came back with 13 different posikim of Torah, right? It's like, well, that's strange. All different angles that they're looking at the Torah. It is this concept that each individual that studies Torah are going to come up with something separate and different. But here's the danger. It says that a person that studies the Torah without a group can easily lead them to sin. Why? Because of a lack of understanding. Now, I would like to preface that by saying many of us have begun our journey and done most of our journey by ourselves. We didn't have Rabbi Wolbe, and we didn't have all the great teaching of our local rabbis here in the community. However, we did have the poskim of the ages, and we was able on a computer to read what the sages said about the Torah. We're able to access. And when we all realized that we could not develop our own Devar Torah, but we must develop our Torah from what the sages say. Only after many hours of study would any of us say, I would maybe, possibly provide an explanation to a text without reading what the sages say. But I have so much fear of God about changing the text or the meaning, I rarely will want to do that. If I don't know, I'll just tell you, I don't know what this means. But when we see how this works out, we realize that Israel had been given the portion not only to be a great nation, to separate themselves to God and become a holy nation, but to also preserve the Torah for the nations. The Rambam says this: a person who translates from one language to another must first understand the subject matter. Then he should relate and explain the subject according to his understanding, providing a clear exposition in the language into which he is translating. This cannot be done without transposing the other words. Thus, the Torah can only be translated by making changes and emanations of all of which is based on tradition of the sages. Why was it written in such coded language, the written Torah? Can you tell me? Does anybody have an idea? No? Take a guess. How about a guess? Educated guess. No educated? Yes. To protect it. It was like our government encrypts, or business does it now, they encrypt their files that they send and transmit over the internet. They encode it. The Torah is encoded in such a way that an individual who could read it, sure, they could have a relationship with Hashem, but they sure would not understand the full breadth and the gravity of that relationship. Why was it encoded? Because they were concerned that the nations would take it and pervert it, change it to something else. And clearly we have seen two major religions that have been developed out of the perversion of the text, right? The perversion of the text, not the oral tradition. Because if they had the oral tradition, they wouldn't have done what they've done. So we have two major religions who's actually done this. In Softim 1:8, it says, give an example of a successful translation of Torah. This is the story of Ptolemy. He took 5 sages to translate the Torah. He convinced two of the sages for the same purpose, he placed them in separate room and asked them to translate the Torah. God granted the inspiration, and each of the 72 sages composed exactly the same translated text. However, each translation included 13 emanations in which the literal meaning of the text was changed to suit the intention. Accordingly, we understand the statement, the day was critical for the Jewish people as the day of the golden calf. Here's an example. Beautiful example. Our sages did not say the day of the golden calf was worshipped on the day of the golden calf was made. Aaron declared, tomorrow will be a festival for God, in the sincere hope that Moshe would come down off of the mountain and motivate the people to do tshuva. Thus, the day when the calf was fashioned contained two potentials, Aaron's concept and those of the people at large. Are you following? It's all about perception. It was a critical day since Israel was presented with a challenge. However, it was possible for them to rise to the challenge and to express the positive potential. The same applies regarding the translation of the Torah. It is possible to distort the text. However, there is a potential through change in emanation based on the oral tradition to convey the Torah's true intent. Thus, we can communicate God's truth to many who cannot appreciate it in the original. This is implied in the commandment that explains God did not want a literal translation of the Torah, but a clear architectural presentation of its ideas. And why is that to be conveyed through oral tradition? It's almost hard for us to fathom why would God want to encode this. We can see it in hindsight why he would want to encode it. But at the time, you would think, well, why wouldn't you want all of the nations to accept it? But anybody who would not accept the Torah is not going to preserve the Torah. That's the thing. The next verse says, verse 9, Moshe and the Kohanim and the Levites spoke to all of Israel, be attentive and hear today. There are two words that we hear. Attentive and hear is what Chumash says. Does anybody have a different translation? How about to listen and hear? What's the difference between listening and hearing something? Aren't they both the same? Okay, so what does it mean? There's a difference here. Listen and hear. What is it? Huh? One is more active. Now we understand that Shema, what does it actually mean, Leslie? Yeah. But what else does it mean? What? Right, but what else does it mean here? To understand, to do. Right. Right. So Shema is not just about an audio intonation. It's actually receiving and doing. Right? Because you have not Shema if you did not do it. Does that make sense? So if I were to tell my children when they were younger, Nate, take out the trash, and I say, did you hear me? And he goes, yes, I heard you. And then later on I said, you take the trash out? And he says, no. Did he Shema? No, he didn't. So now we know what Shema is. So what God says, listen to me, now hear me, do it. And if you will do it, what does he say? He says, be attentive, O Israel, this day you have become a people of God, to Hashem your God. And you shall hearken to the voice of Hashem your God, and you shall perform all of his commandments and his decrees which I command you. This day, that struck me as so odd when I read it. This day. What do you mean this day? What about when Abraham started? How about that day? How about the day that he brought them out of Egypt and they walked through the turmoil of water and they were saved? What about when they were at the bitter waters of Marah? What about when they were at the Sinai and saw the ground shake and tremble and the thunders and lightning? They heard the voice of God. Why wasn't it that day? Because this day is the most important day. Not tomorrow, not yesterday. So this day has a very powerful meaning. So let's look at this for a moment. says, on this day Moses began to prepare for his death. He gave the Torah scroll, which was written in the tribe of Levi, and Deuteronomy 31:9. When the other tribes saw this, they protested. The Torah was given to all of us, not just Levi alone. Listen, let us establish a covenant between you and God, and that whoever desires to study Torah will always be given the opportunity, said Moses. When the people agreed, Moses proclaimed with joy, today you have become a nation. The priests and Levites joined them and showed their eagerness to share Torah with the entire Jewish people. This is found in Yalkut Shimoni. Alternatively, the priests were mentioned, for it was their obligation to teach the law to Jacob and the Torah to Israel. Rabbi Ovadia Sofarno on Deuteronomy 33:10 says this, also these verses were recited as a preparation for the blessing and the curses that were going to come in the next section. So what does he say? Pay attention. How do I live starting today? How do I actually live in the only taste of eternity in physicality? How do I do it? First, by listening. Listen to the words of Torah. Then I must hear the words of Torah by living the words of Torah. We've heard this over and over by Rabbi Moshe Hamlazato, and I do believe it's a mantra of this community, which I'm very proud of. You guys are amazing people that strive hard to live the musar of Torah, to really live by the ethics of Torah. Having the knowledge of Torah without hearing or doing is nothing. Listening without doing is not even effective at all. As a matter of fact, a person can listen to Torah all day long, but if they don't do it, they really don't have Torah. And what little Torah they do have, if they have anger outbursts, or they speak Lashon Hara, or they tear down another individual, what happens to their Torah? It goes away. The other day I admonished someone about this very same idol. This person is a brilliant person that said something about another individual, and it was an environment where everybody around heard it. And he was right if in a secular mindset was absolutely 100% right. Does it make sense? Are you following me? I'm trying not to give too much detail. But in a secular sense, spot on. He deserved to stand up and defend himself. But in a Torah aspect, he was wrong. Because what he did is used a pejorative term to attach to the person's name. And I had to remind them. The sages of blessed memory say that if you use a pejorative term attached to a person's name, it is a sin that is almost impossible to be forgiven of. Why? Because it's like stealing and murdering at the same time. Slander. It's horrible. So why do I say that and why do I bring it up? Because there are many people out there who study Torah. They can quote texts. They can give you the answers. But you look at their life and they're in turmoil all the time. Why? Something is wrong. A person can say, I'm athletic, I run 10 miles a day, then give you all the reasons why that they're so healthy. And yet, when they walk away from you, they're limping and gimping and out of breath. And you think, now hold on a second, how can you be out of breath and limping around if you run 10 miles a day and you're that in shape? You would obviously ask them, are you injured? Did you hurt yourself on the last run? The problem is we're living in a society that everyone lives in such a comfortable illusion that you almost feel obligated to let them still be in an illusion. And in some levels, we almost have to, because the Ramchal reminds us, or actually the Torah reminds us, that we shouldn't take a blind man where he doesn't want to go, right? If you see that someone is blind in their belief systems, and they don't know what's going on, yes, I have an obligation if they're my brother, somebody that I'm close to try to guide them. But do you realize that you cannot take, it is against the Torah law to take someone forcibly against their will to do something that they don't want to do? And on the same line, the Ramchal reminds us that a guy that is willfully blind is like a blind man in the dark, meaning that not even a sighted man can guide that individual. So some people choose to be blind. Some people choose to live in the past. We can try to help them out and say, hey, living in the past is a terrible klipa. Or there are some people that is constantly tore up. Their emunah is very, very weak and challenged because the future is so daunting that they can't hardly wake up, dealing with tremendous amounts of anxiety and depression because of the future. What's going to happen at this point? And what happens if I lose my job? And if I don't do my job right, then what happens if, on and on and on. That is also a klipa that keeps an individual in such a place that they are no longer experiencing the eternal now. Why is the eternal now so important? Because God chooses to be with you and I and His people now. Not tomorrow, not yesterday, now. Why? Because yesterday's gone and tomorrow hasn't happened. I've got to think about every moment of this day. So the next time that you wake up and you have a lot on your plate, which we all do, and we start feeling ourselves stressed out, how are we going to do this? What are we going to do? What happens if A happens and B happens? Then what am I going to do with C? Take a breath and say, hold on. My eternal time clock has just stopped. Why is Shabbos so important? What do they say about Shabbos? What is it? What is it? It is a what?
Island.
It's an island in time.
What?
It's an island in time. It's a pause. Nothing else is connected to it, even down to your Shabbos knife that you cut the bread, special just for Shabbos. You have Shabbos clothes. Everything is special. It's an island in time. But I would like to say that Shabbos is done so that you can have eternal todays. You follow? Shabbos is done on Saturday, so when Sunday rolls around, you can have an eternal today. You can wake up and breathe, big breath of fresh air, and say, okay, Hashem, what do you have for me today? Where do I go? Are you going to give me some bad things to have to handle? Because if so, Baruch Hashem, right? Are you going to give me a day in which I'm going to limp around with my sciatic nerve and not be able to do much? Baruch Hashem. Are you going to give me a day that I get this happened to me last week. Are you going to give me a day in which I lose $70 on a bet with the Humble Police Department, thinking that I could go through the red light and not get caught? And it's funny, my wife's like, I wish, and I went, stop. You have 2 to my 1, okay? And I just said that nationally, internationally. My wife is Joanne. No, I'm just kidding. But the whole point is every moment in my day that is not spent maximizing mitzvah, study Torah, living in Shalom Bayis with my wife and children, is a wasted day. I'm sure we all have to work, we all have to make a living, but in working and making a living, we're using the mundane to make that day an eternal day of connection with Hashem. See, none of us are guaranteed tomorrows, are we? None of us. I have now. So when we all go to bed tonight, we're going to say, Hashem, I'm now going to go to sleep and commit my soul to you. And for the rest of this eternal moment, may I rest in this moment. And as I rest in this eternal moment, may you forgive me of all the moments and times in which I did not have Shalom Bayis, I did not study Torah, I've worried about things that I cannot change. And then give me the strength to wake up and have another day walking with you. Jeff said something really important to me that struck me, and that is living in the moment. Just living in the moment. Have you ever been so hurried, and I'm guilty of this, I've been guilty of it, that you speed through the day and you don't even know what you did. You just sped through. It was so much, so busyness, so much, and you stop at the end of the day and like, what did I just do today? Went by. Put out fires, right? And I told Jeff, I said, it's funny because anytime we have a Parsha, usually about 3 weeks out, Hashem is teaching me about the Parsha that we hadn't even gotten to yet, right? And he's teaching me by what happens in my life. And so I was in a hurry, I went and washed my hands, and I said a quick prayer, and I started to walk downstairs, and I was like, hold on. Let me just talk to Hashem. Hashem, really, I really do love you. And I want to cling to you. Help me to cling to you. And it felt so authentic and pure, and that's what we're talking about. Quit running in the, what do you call that little wheel in the hamster cage? The hamster wheel. Okay, thank you. Great insight there. Quit running in the hamster wheel of life. Get out of it. Get out of that and stop for a moment and think about your relationship with your Creator. This is why Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, when he talks about awe and desire, says these are two essential elements for every person to connect to God. It's two essential elements that without it, we could not connect to Hashem. It is through awe and desire that we recognize the important key. And if you do not, and especially if somebody's watching this, if you are not sure that you have awe and desire, then hitzbadadut is the only thing. Personal prayer. Rabbi Nachman says that the only way you can develop awe and desire is by spending time with Hashem in authentic language. It cannot come through thinking. It's got to come through speaking. You have to speak to the Creator, and you have to vocalize those things that are lacking or needs to be filled in your awe and desire. So as we start to finish the rest of this day, and then we go on tomorrow and the next day, begin to express to Hashem how much you want today to be your day. Today is the most important part of the day. That concludes the shiur, and we'll take some questions and answers if you have any, or comments. Yes.